If God truly exists, then in late 14th century Europe, he must have been taking a nap. It was an era of absolute despair. The Black Death had just scythed through a third of Europe's population like wheat. In the narrow, suffocating streets of Florence, the air was permanently stained with a bizarre stench, a mix of sulfur from the wool workshops, untreated sewage, and the charred scent of burning corpses. At this time, Florence was not the emerald city of the Renaissance we know today. The Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore was just an abandoned construction site. That famous red dome hadn't been built yet, simply because no one knew how. It sat in the center of the city, silent, like a massive gaping wound. But right in the shadow of this wound, rising from the ashes of death and chaos, a new power was growing wild. This power didn't belong to knights with swords, nor to dukes with land. It belonged to a group of shrewd, greedy, yet incredibly pragmatic citizens. In a corner of the market, not far from the cathedral, sat an unremarkable middle-aged man. He wasn't handsome. In fact, he was somewhat ugly. A flat nose, cautious eyes, and a hint of bitterness always lingering at the corners of his mouth. In front of him was a shabby wooden table, a banco stacked with a few account books. His name was Giovanni de' Medici. Remember this humble figure, because this very man, sitting behind a broken table, would completely alter the trajectory of Europe for centuries to come. His family would use gold as their ultimate weapon, stepping up from this very desk to the absolute pinnacle of power, eventually buying the Pope's crown and the throne of France itself. But in 1397, he had to solve one fatal problem first: how to keep himself out of hell. Giovanni was in the banking business. To put it bluntly in medieval terms, he was a usurer, a loan shark. Today, being a banker is a respectable profession. But in the Middle Ages, it was a business born of original sin. The Christian doctrine kept a strict stranglehold on the world. The Gospel of Luke clearly states, "Lend, expecting nothing in return." Aristotle also famously declared, "Money cannot give birth to money." In the eyes of the church, money was a dead object. If a dead thing could breed, which is what interest is, that was sorcery. It was the theft of God's creative power. Dante Alighieri showed no mercy to usurers in his Divine Comedy. He threw them straight into the seventh circle of hell. There, under an eternal rain of fire, the usurers sit with heavy money bags stamped with their family crests hanging from their necks, twisting in agony for all eternity, with no hope of escape. Giovanni was a devout believer. He feared death, but he feared the final judgment even more. Yet, he was also a businessman. He knew that without profit, his family would be chewed up and spat out by the brutal political machine of Florence. And so, caught between the crushing weight of religious terror and worldly greed, Giovanni revealed his genius as the first godfather of the Medici family. He invented a trick so clever that even God couldn't decipher it: the bill of exchange. If you lent money in Florence and collected interest directly, it was a felony. But what if you were just facilitating trade? You exchanged Florentine currency for London currency, and because of the long distance and fluctuating exchange rates, a slight margin of difference is created. Isn't that perfectly legal? Giovanni brilliantly hid the interest inside exchange rates and transaction fees. Not only did he bypass the church's laws, but he also made the business look like a charity. "I am simply helping merchants manage their cash flow," he'd say. Riding the edge of this massive loophole, the Medici bank survived. But it wasn't enough. In Florence, having money without power was like a child walking through a dark alley holding a brick of gold. The ancient Albizzi family was circling like vultures, watching the wallets of these new elites, ready to confiscate their wealth at any moment under the charge of heresy. Giovanni needed a protective umbrella, an umbrella so massive that even the law couldn't touch it. So, he turned his sights to the most unlikely candidate on earth: a pirate.